the more you see yourself as flawed, as human, as not needing to be perfect, the more accepting you are. And counterintuitively, the more effective you become, because you then have a lot of positive energy.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for watching and joining us on this. Just to introduce our guest, this is Shaheen Mistri. A lot of you might be familiar with Teach for India already, but thank you, Shaheen, for agreeing to do this for us and sharing your story and wisdom from being on this journey a lot longer than we are on Spaces. I thought I would start with just saying my first memory of you, actually. You might not know this. I don't know if I've said this to you, but my first memory of you was on a campus recruitment presentation, and I saw you on a screen. I think it was Rebecca was doing this presentation, and I remember sitting there at a time where I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was very much like the kind of person who just thought one step ahead. And I remember sitting there and watching that video. There was a little bit of your story, and it was just so electrifying. There was something very raw about the passion and that desire to make a change. And I was just like, I want to be part of this. And fast forward now to connecting back with you. And it's so exciting for me that the idea of Spaces has resonated with you personally. So just want to thank you. From the team, we're all so excited to learn from you and have that encouragement.
Oh, thank you, Dorcas. It's my most favorite thing is catching up with alums and seeing where their life journeys take them. And again, when I saw your mail on Spaces, it really did very, very deeply resonate as a concept and a need, I think, in today's world.
Yeah, thank you. This interview times perfectly for us because, and I think we have put this on Instagram now, but yesterday we got to know that we are officially registered as a charity, which I'm sure you are familiar with how intense the process is.
It wasn't as intense for you as it was for me when I first started Akanksha, my first organization, because at that time, we would run to the charity commissioner day after day, and they wouldn't even tell you what they required. And every time you went, there was one more paper that they needed or one more document. So yeah,
wow, thank you. It's really exciting. It feels like legitimate now, you know? I don't know how it felt for you, but till now, there was that part of us that felt like this is just something that we get, you know? Other people probably think this is just a little hobby that they're doing on the side, whereas now it feels more real.
Yeah.
So I thought we'll start with just opening this up to you, and maybe if you could tell us a little bit about your story with, like you just mentioned, Akanksha and Teach for India, just the highlights or just the story aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you the high level headline story. So I think I was one of those people that very early on had a lot of clarity as to what I wanted to do. I think as early as 12 or 13, I knew that I loved kids and I loved animals and I wanted to do something that made a difference in the world. And then at 18, I guess that was the first sort of really big moment of my life where I dropped out of university. I was at Tufts University, moved back to India, walked into a community and started teaching. And just decided really on an instinct that I wanted to be in India and do something in India. So that was, I think, the first major milestone. And at that point, I think what I wanted to do was really use the resources that I saw everywhere around me for the education of kids. And so that really led to the first organization that I set up, which was called Akanksha. I was very young. I was 18. I didn't really know anything about anything, including about teaching. But we would literally, we started our founding board. We're all college students. We'd sit around at each other's homes and think back to our school days and what we liked and didn't like. And we just started by teaching ourselves and mobilizing volunteers to teach. So Akanksha was a huge learning and growing experience for me. I spent 17 years building it up. Really, the vision of Akanksha was to give kids an excellent education, kids living in poverty. And through that experience, I got to spend a lot of time in communities, spend a lot of time with children, spend a lot of time teaching. And I think that shaped me in the most sort of profound ways that I've ever really been shaped. And then 17 years later, I think the next big milestone was sort of looking in the mirror and saying, how do I do this at scale, given the complexity and scale of India? And that's when I founded Teach for India, which was not a new idea. It was modeled after and deeply inspired by Teach for America, which had started years earlier in the US. But the idea that if we are to solve the problem of equity in education, we need leadership. And we need leaders to come together across sectors at every level of the system to solve the problem. That very deeply resonated. And so launched Teach for India. Teach for India is now 11 years old, so we completed our first decade. And I think that's, I mean, in a nutshell, that's really my story.
No, thank you. I can't believe it's been 11 years. When I joined, it was 2 years old. Feels like a lifetime ago. Just to pick up a couple of things that you mentioned there, like going back to when you started a kancha with friends, sitting in people's houses, and, it feels like we're at that stage now. How did you know who to contact, who those people were going to be in your team? Did you just go to everyone you knew, or were you more strategic about who you picked? Like, just curious how you did that.
Well, I was not at all strategic. I think at that time I enrolled in a college, Xavier's College, in Mumbai. And I would literally hand paint posters saying, like, you can make a difference, do something. And I would walk around from class to class and put these posters up. And literally walk up to people sitting in the canteen chatting. And I would ask them, like, why aren't you doing anything to solve all of India's problems? And I think people would be a little taken aback. But interestingly, I never came across a single student that didn't want to do something. And that was really powerful for me to realize that, like, there's a lot of things that stop people from acting, but the intention to do good and contribute is very, very high. So that's really how I started. And through that, organically, some people became more interested. The first 5 years, we were all volunteers. So it was literally people that had a little bit of time that wanted to do something that came together.
Wow, that takes a lot of courage, though, doesn't it? Like, I think going up to people you don't know, complete strangers. Like, I think when I started, for example, I went to people I really knew and trusted, with the idea, and then went wider. Now I feel like I'm at a stage where I can talk to anybody about it. But did you feel that internally, afraid of people's responses, or was there any hesitation at all? Or was that just like you were excited enough?
I think it's so interesting. I mean, so much of your actions reflect your personality. And I think there's an aspect of my personality that is quite rebellious. And part of that is that I don't care that much about what most people say. I care disproportionately about what a few people say. And so for me, the idea that, like, I may approach someone and they may say no, or they may think it's a stupid idea, or like, mattered to me, I think, less. And so I remember, like, for example, one of the big early challenges that Akanksha was finding a space to teach. And I went to 20 odd schools and they all said no. And they said no, and some of them for the most bizarre reasons, according to me as a young person. I couldn't understand people saying basic education is revolutionary, and I don't want people from slum communities in the same classrooms as high-income kids. But I just kept going, and I said, eventually, like, somebody's going to say yes. And so I guess I was quite thick-skinned, and didn't care that much about the no. And it served me well in many ways. It has a flip side as well, of course.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. That, like, I think just whatever personality you are, actually, there's a different way to do it, but you can still make a
Yeah.
change. I hope that's something that people listening take away. Is it doesn't matter who you are as an individual, you could still do something.
Yeah.
Going to what you said about people's hesitation in like opening schools up, and I'm sure there were many other challenges along the way, like, with Teach for India as well. What would you say were the most difficult for you personally to manage in terms of challenges or barriers?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you the most difficult to manage, and then I'll tell you one thing I've learned about challenges over
Yeah.
time. I think the most difficult, undoubtedly,
Mm-hmm.
have been the real problems that children face who live in poverty. Nothing has been as difficult. I mean, 30 years into this work, when a child commits suicide, or a child has severe mental health issues, or a child's father is abusing a young girl in the home, like, I don't think that's the kind of thing you ever can get used to. And that's been the most difficult, that constant reminder of what it means to grow up in poverty, and the kinds of disproportionate challenges that our kids face.
Yeah.
And then extended and very closely linked to that is the impact that that then has on the people that work with the child, right? So how does a 23-year-old fellow process those kinds of challenges and issues? And so learning how to support and be there, and at the same time embrace the idea that there are challenges that we just have to face, and we have to develop the resilience to be able to do that. I think that's been the hardest challenge. If I were to choose a very close second, it's been just the surprising mindsets at so many different levels. I know when I was young and I used to spend a lot of time in the community itself, just encountering mindsets that were very different from mine when I started my work and we were all volunteers. The mindset towards volunteering, and sometimes, you'd show up, and then if there was a movie with your friends, you wouldn't show up. People's mindsets and shifting that have been much bigger challenges for me than the actual challenges that are ongoing, of like raising money or like leveraging the government. I mean, of course, building a team, all of those are difficult, but I think it's really like people's biases, people's mindsets, shifting the way people think has been the toughest, and shifting the way that I think about things.
That's so interesting, actually, because we were talking, just reflecting yesterday, we did a last minute call all together when we found out about registration, and to kind of celebrate that milestone as a team. And one of the things that has been highlighted to us so much, and with Spaces, we launched Safe Spaces first because it is about that mindset, that heart work. And one of the things we've realized just in the short time that we've been up is the people that need to change the most sometimes is us internally as well. And I think just setting this up has been so good for us to be really intentional. Every time we have a group and somebody says something and you think, how can another person even think that way, And as soon as you do now, as Spaces team, we're like, oh, I need to listen to this person. And actually, it seems like such an ongoing journey of challenging biases internally as well, because I find unless we're doing it really consciously and being transparent about that, we can't really expect others to come alongside us and engage in the group in an honest way. So I suppose that's like, it's just a constant thing, isn't it? That mindset change, and there's constant growth and constant development. It doesn't stop. Which brings me to which is a good question, I suppose, for us. How do you do that? Like, how do you ensure that you're constantly listening or challenging your own mindset through this process?
I mean, I think some of I guess when you think of like who are those people and things around you that have really been a mirror, that have made you sort of look at yourself in different ways. I think at the top of the list would actually be children that I've worked with. Just help me see things very, very differently. Whether it's, the way I thought about the amount that I give to others, and then realizing and seeing a child just give so unconditionally, and realizing that I never really understood what unconditional giving looked like, or the kind of courage that kids that I've worked with have, and going back and needing to look in the mirror and really asking myself, like, are you courageous? And how much more can you push yourself? I think when you work with children and communities that live with so much challenge, there is a resilience and a courage and a compassion that you see every single day that is humbling. And I think that's really been a very big mirror for me. I think more recently it's been more explicit practices, spending more time on my own. It's been different things at different times. I think spending time with animals has taught me a great deal about who I want to be. Meditation, the people around me, conversation, learning from people that are very different from me and listening to them. But it's all work in progress. I mean, I think I got a little bit of a shock a couple of years ago when we went through a crisis within Teach for India, and I had always thought of myself as a deeply empathetic person that listened a lot, and the feedback I got when we really looked was no, there are aspects and things and blind spots that you have around listening, around power, that you're just unaware of. And so I think just staying as open as you can be it is really helpful. You keep getting surprised by your own blind spots and the things you need to work on.
Actually, that's something I'm curious about, because we've already received so much very strong criticism with spaces, and because we're dealing with some big issues that people have very strong opinions about. And this example you mentioned of when you were made aware of blind spots, what was your internal reaction? How did you handle that? How did you, move forward?
I mean, I think for me, there were phases of reaction. I think the first was a little bit of disbelief and shock. I think the second was action. I mean, I'm a very action-oriented person, so I don't like staying in the space of thinking too much. I like I will learn from doing. So let me just do differently. If I wasn't doing this enough, let me do differently.
Right.
And the last phase, I think, was just tremendous gratitude that it had surfaced. That even if you go through that difficult time, the worst thing is actually the ignorance, right?
That's
because it's all happening around you, but you're ignorant of your own blind spots. So I think just knowing and acknowledging has been really, really helpful. I think one thing that a board member told me years ago is something that I've clung to for many years. She sat down with me one day and she said, I was very worked up at that time. I wasn't able to manage home and I wasn't able to manage work, and everything seemed like a struggle. And she sat down and said, who do you think you are? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, why do you act like you're a superwoman? She's like, I want to tell you, you're very ordinary. You're never going to be a superwoman at home, and you're never going to be a superwoman at work. And the minute you stop trying to be that, you will accept yourself as human, and other people will accept you as human as well. I think that's been really liberating for me, that I don't have to be perfect, telling myself that I don't even need to aspire to be perfect. I can just be human. And I think that was a very big learning for me.
Yeah, I love that. Aspire to be human, not perfect. I feel like that's very quotable. That brings me to my next question. So this month we're talking about gender, and we've had some really big conversations about women. What does it look like for a woman today? This trying to do it all, trying to have it all kind of idea, and the pressure that comes with it. What has it looked like for you as a mother while you're starting up some very big organizations? Like Teach for India is massive, and having to negotiate that while raising two daughters. how have you negotiated that and balanced it, or just figured it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to ask my daughters, they would say not very well. I think balance has been extremely difficult for me. I think for many years I didn't even believe in the concept of balance. I actually thought that, like, to be successful and to
Yeah.
have impact in the world, you need to be in balance. Like,
Right.
still to really push me. There's a part of me that's sort of hangs on to that and says, but anyone that I really look up to in the world threw themselves entirely into something.
Yes.
So I think I've struggled a lot with balance, but I think what helped me a lot over time was letting go of guilt. I used to hold a lot of guilt, and one day, really, I just woke up and said, it's such an unhelpful emotion. It makes you feel bad and it doesn't change anything, you know? And so again, coming back to that theme of the more you see yourself as flawed, as human, as not needing to be perfect, the more accepting you are. And counterintuitively, the more effective you become, because you then have a lot of positive energy. And so what happened post that was I just started becoming more aware of when the imbalance was affecting me, and I just would rebalance at those times. But it's taken me a lot of time, and I'm still definitely not fully there.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful for me personally as well. I feel that on a daily basis. If I'm answering a Spaces email that's like urgently come through while I have a 3-year-old saying, "Mommy, play with me," and then there's that guilt of like, "Oh no, I'm choosing wrong," or the other way around sometimes, and it's that constant guilt, and I don't know where it necessarily comes from, whether it's external or internal or a combination. And it seems to me stronger for women, like as mothers, like there's that expectation that you are going to be an exceptional mother and do all the packed lunches and all the crafts and all of that, from scratch, and post the perfect Instagram pictures and all of that. But then at the same time, be an exceptional career woman as well, if that's what you choose. And it's unbearable, that pressure, and actually, like what you said about changing what we aspire to personally and aspiring more realistically and aspiring not for perfection but for just being human. I don't know if I'll get that in one day, but it's definitely going to be a work in progress.
You referenced this earlier, Dorcas, but I think so much of this is just internal work, and it's slow internal work, which is where I think meditation and silence and reflection and these practices, whatever practices you choose, but when having daily practices, having people around you who are your mirror, having someone in your life who just loves and accepts you unconditionally, I think those pieces all together over time they don't change the situation, but you become much better at dealing with it.
Just quickly, if you could tell us some practices, some really simple things that you've put in place to do that. So like you mentioned meditation or other people, like what would be your top 3 that you practice?
I think for me it's about really spending time doing things that give me energy, and those things have changed at different times in my life. And spending time very consciously with people who give me energy. I realized that a lot of my energy getting pulled down was coming from a few people around me. There's nothing wrong with those people, but they just were not giving me that energy. And so if I were to say the top 3 things right now, learning new things gives me a tremendous amount of energy. So I've started painting, which is giving me a lot of joy and energy over the last year. I think spending time with animals gives me energy. We got a new puppy just 3 days ago. So that, I have 6 animals at home. So that gives me a lot of energy. And I think just people, the people that are around me, those would be my top 3 right now.
Thank you. Final question. One of the things that we felt personally, but also a lot of people connecting with Spaces are ordinary people, a lot of young people, a lot of just from all over the world feeling really small and daunted by the scale of the problem, which has been really highlighted in so many ways in 2020. What would you say to people like that? Really ordinary people around the world who just feel like, I see the need for change, I would love to do something, but the problem is so big, and how can I, as an ordinary, normal person, ever hope to make a dent in this? Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of like a cliched story, I think the starfish story comes to mind as you ask that question. Little boy walking on the street on the beach, and the tide is pushing up like thousands of starfish, and this little boy is literally picking up one at a time and throwing them back into the sea. And a man comes up to him and says, "What are you doing? It's so pointless. For every one you throw in, like 1,000 are being washed up." And he looks at the man, picks up one more in front of him, throws it in, and says, "But for that one, it made a difference." And I think that's the way increasingly we need to see our place in the world, that every step that we take, every kind word that we put into the world, every kind action, every time we help somebody, it's that the collective force of good that we add to that I think is the real hope for the world. When I was 18 and I first started my work, I had the same question. I was like, but I have to change everything. I remember I was interning with a reporter from the Times of India, and he sat me down at a small South Indian restaurant. He took out a piece of paper and he said, "Write the population of the world down." And I put the denominator down, and he said, "Now put a line over it and put 1 at the top." He said, "That's you. And that's the number of people in the world." He said, "Anything you can do more than that is good. Don't try to solve anything. Just take a lot of pride and confidence in every step and push yourself as much as you can."
Thank you. That's a beautiful story. I haven't heard it. I feel like I heard it from you at Institute, but not in a long time. And it's really great to be reminded of it. And I know everyone listening is going to be encouraged by that as well. I just want to remind people, if you're watching this and you feel daunted by the scale of the problem, we're representing 2 amazing ways that you can get involved. If you're interested in Teach for India, please look them up. We'll leave all the links wherever we post this to Teach for India and Spaces. Get in touch, get involved. There is a place for you, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much, Shaheen. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we end?
No, just thank you so much, and good luck to all of you at Spaces. And I really hope it ends up being a safe and constructive space for such real dialogue. It's the most powerful thing I think that can change the world, is just real, honest and authentic conversation, and spaces that allow you to be fully yourself. So good luck to you.
Thank you so much.